What's going on, sports card hobby friends and family? We are back again, another day, another sports card video. How the heck is everybody doing? Hope you had an amazing holiday weekend. It was good for me, all except for my football team, man. My New Orleans Saints. Not only have we lost basically half the roster to injury, but even when they're not injured, just not playing that well. So football season, fantasy football season, kind of going down the tubes. I will be in New Orleans next week to watch the Detroit Lions probably run 400 yards on our defense, but hey, it'll be a good time. I'll be meeting my brother out there. Good times ahead. Huge shout out to today's video sponsor, COMC.com, your home for buying, selling, and flipping all the hottest trading cards. Their consignment marketplace now home to over 33 million cards from baseball's biggest stars like Shohei Ohtani, Aaron Judge, and Mookie Betts to Marvel favorites like Spider-Man, Thor, and Captain America. COMC has something for every type of collector, so make sure to visit my link down below video description as well as in the pinned comments to get the journey on COMC.com started. All right, had this thought over the weekend and actually kind of inspired a little bit by Jeff Wilson had a video last night at a trade night, and not much different from a lot of his other content, but a lot of teenagers in there doing trades and this, that sort of thing. And it made me just kind of reminisce a little bit back to the first card boom when I was a kid, going back to 1987 to 1994.
The real spirit of baseball card collecting lies in the older cards.
I think we could say that's probably a good range for the card boom. I would argue we are still in a card boom. I know card prices have moved down quite a bit here over the last couple of years, but there is no shortage of interest in our hobby currently. So I still consider this part of the boom. But man, I was just thinking every single part of the experience nowadays compared to back then is better. Now, I know there's a lot of things that we can look at, scammy type stuff in the hobby. That will always be there. But man, if we really compare, let's just start with buying and selling cards. Buying and selling cards basically consisted of, I can remember when I was a kid, the last time I set up to sell was at a flea market when I was 12 years old. I'm actually going to be a dealer at the Culture Collision Show in Atlanta end of January. That'll be my first time setting up as a dealer for fun in 30 years. Okay, but just going back in time, you want to sell cards, you either sell them back, trade them back to a card shop, you buy a table at a flea market, or maybe you buy a table at a shopping mall, because there was a lot of card shows back then that were inside shopping malls. But you really weren't doing that much as a young person. That was adults that were buying tables, in a shopping mall to sell cards. And so I guess my point here is that if you wanted to actually sell cards, move out of cards, you had very limited options to do so. You also had very limited information to be able to negotiate with. Thank God that we have online marketplaces that keep data, that keep sales data. And of course, you got data tools that are keeping track of these sorts of things. We were really flying blind back as 9, 10, 11, 12-year-old, 15-year-old kids in the late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. And you were basically going by what the dealer was telling you the comp was. Oh, these sell for about $20, and he might be selling them for $80, $100. I mean, it was a total Wild West back then, completely blind as far as knowing what comps were on anything. And actually, I do think that that's a big part of why there is additional interest in the hobby, is actually being able to properly price collectibles now. And I'm not saying it's easy to do. There's a lot of one-on-ones. There's a lot of different cards that don't transact often, but at least you've got a baseline where you can compare, okay, this sold for this. This is what we're negotiating. This is kind of how I'm coming up with a price. We didn't have anything like that back then. It was nothing like that. So the hobby has matured dramatically. Add in third-party grading. As much as people get upset or just can't stand or don't like different parts of third-party grading, completely necessary part of the hobby. Very, very necessary. And we have 4 companies now, the big 4, that are really doing a good job at this. And I'm talking about PSA, SGC, BGS, and CGC. So we have strong companies in the space that are trustworthy, most of them operating for a long period of time. CGC is fairly new to the market, but they have been grading for a long time, whether it be coins, or they're the leader in comic book grading. So you've got big entities out here that are doing a good job authenticating, not just the grading part, but authenticating. I know they miss stuff here and there, but we need it. We absolutely need it, because back then, you didn't have anything. Trying to buy raw cards from dealers. This is added to the maturation of this hobby/industry over time. Also, just from a marketing standpoint, social media. You can be absolutely nobody, average Joe, and you can build a social media presence, whether it be Instagram or YouTube or TikTok or whatever it is, Facebook or whatever that social media is. You are able to go out essentially for free. And if you are creative and can kind of come up with some witty things, understand technology, how it works, and use it to your advantage, you don't have to spend huge money. You're not buying, newspaper spots to try to buy, sell collections. You're not having to buy a TV commercial. Sure, you can, but you don't really have to. It's all there for you on social media. Social media has dramatically changed just how people share their collections as well. In 1990, nobody knew what anybody had. Unless it was your buddies down the street in the same neighborhood in the same town, you didn't know what the next town had. You didn't know what the next state had. Now I can literally see what people in the Philippines are collecting just with a click of a button. It's absolutely insane, the advances that we've seen over the last 30 years in this space, thankfully to technology. Just think about auction houses going back. Now we have online auction houses. This didn't really heat up until the late 90s. eBay was a startup company in the mid-1990s, Amazon as well. But eBay, the leader right now as far as buying, selling collectibles, as far as eyeballs goes and volume of transactions, when I was 14, 15, 16, 17 years old, this was a startup company. Nobody was buying and selling anything on it. They didn't know how to pay for it. PayPal hadn't come about yet. You didn't have how do I pay online? I'm sending a money order. You were literally sending money orders and checks in the mail for eBay orders. People today, if you're a 20-year-old, you probably can't imagine that. Think about just how inefficient the market was going back during those times. That's kickstarted online auctions. This is the biggest boon for collectibles, in my opinion, because you don't have to be in there in person at an auction house somewhere listening to the guy, who's got 100, who's got 100, 150, 200. Now it's all on. You can be on your couch with a bag of chips and bid on whatever. Buy cards, buy collectibles. It's never been easier to do it. And they're still making advances. I think card shows are interesting because a lot of card shows haven't changed a lot in 30 years, but we're starting to see the wheels turn a little bit on that. I've heard about technology to where you're going to be able to know kind of what dealers have what cards. There's going to be more motion on card shows because look, card shows are extremely popular still. And again, we're talking about a tough market. We're in a bear market. We're in a bear market where cards have come down dramatically. Dealers are not making near as much money as possible, but there's still obviously money being made and a love for it to where people are getting out. There's a camaraderie that continues the momentum in this space. What's the story that most of the 40-plus-year-olds like myself tell when you hear how'd you get into the hobby? When did you start collecting cards? It's pretty much the same story. Oh, we were kids during the 80s, 90s. Then we grew up, we got out of it, we got to high school, we were interested in other things, and we moved out of cards. Well, when I look at this now, I look at this as there's a lot of people that are, 13, 14, 15, whatever, that are kind of, they're doing this and they're learning and they're getting used to kind of this side hustle, buy, sell, and collect these certain cards and sets. And this combination of business / hobby that we have. And I think that a lot of these guys are not going to get out at 16, 17, 18, 20, whatever. I think they're going to stay in, and this can be a nice little side hustle, a side hobby thing that people are able to do. And I'm not necessarily talking about flipping the newest quarterback. I'm talking about the variety of different ways that you're able to buy, sell, trade, and have a good time here. It just seems to me like a much higher percentage of these younger people are going to stay in it in some capacity. Yeah, they might not be opening a card store, but they can certainly do this as a fun side gig. It's becoming more acceptable. Nerd culture is becoming more and more acceptable. Look at all the social media that's around sports cards, non-sports cards, comic books, video games, the whole retro, comic book video game thing. It's cool now. It's cool to be these 80s nerds like me. And the next generation is catching on to that. So I think this is kind of a fun time. So even during kind of it's kind of a bear market for cards and collectibles, man, there is so much you can look at and just say like, wow, there are some really cool things going on. All right, guys, have a fantastic week ahead. Stay healthy, stay awesome, and I will talk to you again later.